How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest. He's an elite powerlifting coach and the owner of Kodiak Barbell. Today, I'm joined by the one and only Stuart Locke. How are you doing?
Living the dream, man. Cannot complain. Life is good.
Oh, good. Well, I suppose the first question is, yeah, what's been happening in your world recently? How are you? What's been going on?
Just busy, man. We're busy. By the grace of God, we're busy. We're just pushing forward in business. Um, everyone's uh, everyone's doing well. All of our clients are crushing, and we are blessed beyond measure.
Business as usual, then, eh?
Exactly.
So I know I did quite a brief introduction at the start, and I know for myself, following the content and information that you share, but for everyone listening who might not know your background in coaching, in lifting, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself, Stu.
Yeah, absolutely. So started lifting in I think 2006 for football, and then I was afforded the opportunity to go play football at the University of Ottawa. So I ended up playing 2 years of football at the University of Ottawa, and then I ended up playing 2 years of rugby as well. And then ended up finishing my contact sport career. And then I was like, all right, I'm just gonna get into powerlifting. And then competed in powerlifting for from 2015 to 2024, so 9 years. I think my best total was 1862. My best lifts were, I think I squatted 716 in sleeves, benched for 35, and then I pulled 722. And then May of 2024, I ruptured both my patellar tendons. So rode off into the sunset, and I'm happily retired.
Yeah, I suppose from going from that, and I think we'll dive into a little bit like when we're setting up this podcast. We'll dive into that a little bit more. But the question I want to know is as well, playing football and playing rugby, which one do you prefer? Especially coming from an Englishman, having played rugby myself, which one do you prefer?
Well, I think any sport where you can kind of do everything, right? Like you can tackle, you can carry the ball, you can scrum. I love rugby. I still coach rugby. Like I coach the UNF men's rugby team. I coach the forwards
Oh,
and
cool.
teaching them the dark arts of the scrum. So it's been fun.
Yeah, yeah. If those lessons can be learned, I don't know. I literally watched the game the other day because, especially being in Thailand, the games are on sometimes a little bit later, so I can't always watch them. And yeah, it's funny when the commentator tries to pick apart what's gone on, and then someone who's played in the front row will just turn around and be like, "Yeah, it's just the dark arts of the scrum." Moving on to the lifting side of things, obviously, name of the podcast is Strength Chat, and you've mentioned there, the injury that you had, but also, not so long ago being in hospital as well, and I suppose kind of. The first question from that, from the lifts that you mentioned beforehand, the years that you competed in powerlifting, how kind of, or I suppose the better question is, has your mindset changed from pre-injury, pre-hospital towards now in terms of how you maybe approach programming, training, coaching, or is it kind of just putting that down to an experience and then moving on from there, if that kind of makes sense?
I think the biggest difference in coaching pre and post was have making sure that people have other stuff in their life so that lifting isn't the only thing that they have. By the grace of God, I was afforded the privilege that, like, when I was done competing, it was, I still had other things in my life. I had a rich life. I had other hobbies and things that I could do. And what I started to notice after the fact was, like we're about an hour from Perfect Storm. So I would always go and train with Dan Bell. And dude, Dan's just living his life, right? He's out, he's riding his motorcycle, he's, going on these trips with his wife and all kinds of stuff. And he was having a ton of fun. And I realized paradoxically that the people who just like lived their life and powerlifting was a part of it actually enjoyed more success than people who made powerlifting their entire life. And I always kind of caution people who are like really like quote unquote all in. Um, I tell them, I'm like, hey, there's an expiration date on this, and I'm not telling you to not try hard. I'm saying the opposite, right? But it's like, go into the gym, do what you need to do to be successful, track your food, focus on your recovery and stuff. But like, there's got to be other things going on, because there is an end date here. And if you leave powerlifting and you have nothing else in your life, it's going to be a really brutal exit, and you're going to deal with a lot of really hard stuff.
Yeah. Do you think for that, because sometimes you see, especially the entry point for powerlifting, for strength training, people can come in, see progress relatively quickly, compete, and then all of a sudden, especially from maybe my experience, I'm not sure about yourself, who maybe haven't played other sports, and it's just kind of like, oh, lifting weights is a sport. This is cool. I'm just gonna go and do that. Do you think that's where it's going to be a limited lifespan for people, and then they then struggle to find something else? Because the reason I say that is because I've seen other powerlifters go and give CrossFit a go, strongman a go. They end up doing other types of training to continue training, as opposed to, oh yeah, I'm this ex powerlifter that doesn't do a right lot now.
Well, and I think that speaks volumes to like why someone got into lifting weights in the first place, right? Like if they liked this idea of like progress and getting better and like having measurable improvements, they're gonna find something else. But it comes back down to the why behind these sorts of things. And I think a lot of people who haven't played other sports, right? It's like, I'm sure when you got into rugby, you weren't like, oh, I'm going to, go play for the national side and get a ton of caps and be the best ever. You're like, I'm going to go out, I'm going to have fun. I've been playing this forever. And if something comes of it, cool. If something doesn't come of it, that's great. And I think a lot of the times people who have staying power and are able to transition to other things are people who have that attitude and that mindset. A very good friend of mine, his name's Skylar. He was a very good power lifter. And when he left powerlifting, he had wrestled for 10 years before he ever started powerlifting, and he just like went into jujitsu, and he does really well, but he just wanted a competitive outlet, right? He just
Yeah.
wanted something to do. And I think some people, if you get into it for the wrong reason, where it's like, you want other people to give you your flowers and your accolades, and you're doing it for this kind of like external validation, there's a pretty short expiration date on that, because you start to realize that there's no amount of other people gassing you up that will make you motivated. Like eventually that fades. And the people who end up accomplishing a lot, like they're doing it because they just want to see how far they can take it, as opposed to like what other people say to them about how strong they are.
Yeah, definitely. And with that, especially for you, when you've said there, you had other things, or you have other things in your life, has your why changed around training? Has your kind of like thought process on that changed, or were you already in that space of, yeah, obviously, a big injury there, but you've got, other things around you. Has your why changed?
Yeah, absolutely. So, before it was like, oh, I just gotta push myself, I gotta be the best, I gotta try really hard, I gotta be my best, et cetera, et cetera. And it was kind of all consuming. It was kind of miserable, to be honest. And now, like when I go into the gym, right, like there was a pretty high chance, 3 months ago, it was like 3 months ago today, like that I couldn't be here. And
Yeah.
so now, like I go into the gym and I'm like, dude, this is the best. Even if I have a bad session, I'm able to work out. And I think for people listening, I hope that no one ever goes through that circumstance, but it's like you got to realize that like every time you go into the gym is awesome. The fact that you are capable of being able to go in and have a bad session, right? There's plenty of people who would kill to be able to train at all.
Yeah.
And you are afforded this privilege and this opportunity. It's like, don't waste it. Enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I saw you share something either a couple of days ago of kind of the point of, I can't remember word for word what you said, but it was kind of like coming back from where you were a few months ago could be a case of go in on yourself, whereas actually it's no, I want to move forward, I want to get back into the gym, I want to train. And especially from what you've said there, there's kind of, it comes across as quite a positive mindset. Whereas, two big things there, a big injury lifting, being in hospital a few months ago. How how did you kind of approach that mindset side of things? Was it a thing of, look, this is where I am right now. This is what I need to do, or coming out of that being like, all right, I can actually, start progressing from this, or what were kind of like the challenges around that mindset, because they're two quite big things that you'd be like, hell, that's another thing that's come up.
Yeah, and I think for me, like what got me through it was this realization. Like it's something called the Stockdale paradox. So there was this the longest POW in U.S. history. He was in the Hanoi Hilton in Vietnam for like 7 or 8 years, and they asked him how he mentally survived 8 years because a lot of guys would just break mentally and then they would die soon after, right? Um, and they asked him, and he said, "Well, it's." They asked him who failed the quickest or gave up the quickest. He said, "Oh, it's the optimists." And they were like, "Well, why?" And he's like, "Because they kept lying to themselves and saying, 'Oh, I'll be out by Christmas, I'll be out by Easter, I'll be out by New Year's, whatever.' And then when that time didn't come, they just give up mentally. And then they're like, okay, well, who else?" He's like, the pessimists, because they didn't have enough hope to keep going. And so what he came up with this was the idea of the Stockdale paradox, which is you can never lie to yourself about the difficulty or how crappy the current circumstance you find yourself is, right? It's like, no, this sucks. This is like a 10 out of 10 bad. Don't want to be here. This sucks. And the reason why it's a paradox is you also can't give up hope that things will improve and things will get better. So it's completely accepting the circumstance that you're in, but also holding out and understanding that things will get better. And so for me, that's just, in both those circumstances with my knees and with this, that's what I realized. All right. I was like, you know what? 2024, I had to relearn how to walk. That was really crappy. That was really, really hard. But I'm eventually going to be able to walk, right? Like I'm eventually going to be able to train my lower body again. I'm eventually going to be able to do these things that I currently can't do. And there's no way that I don't, right? Like the tendons were reattached. It's not like they were unable to reattach them. And then even after my bicep and then, the stuff that came after that as well, like, I got out and I was like, I think I was 100 and I don't know, 105 and a half kilos or something, which is the lightest I'd been in 12 years, 13 years. And I remember like I walked around the block and I was so tired that I had to come home and like have a nap. I was like, I literally, I'm exhausted. First time I went to the gym, I tried to do 10 bodyweight squats and I tried to do 10 and I got to 8 and I had to like use my hand to help me get up. And then I was so tired afterwards that I had to go home. I was a mess, right? But I understood, hey, this is normal. This is expected given what I've gone through. So for me, I just have to accept where I'm at, understand that it's going to get better, and then just get on with it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's I don't know how big into films you are, but when you say there about like hope, is it on Mad Max with Tom Hardy where it's like it's the hope that kind of like kills you, if you keep tipping it, keep thinking, oh, it's going to be this, whereas accepting where you're at. Do you think, just digging a little bit deeper into the mindset side of things, obviously, from what you've saying there, kind of accepting where it is and being like, right, this is the situation there it is. I get the impression you wanted to, move on from there and start building things back up. Do you think that's kind of a mindset from previous training, people you surround yourself with, environment, something that you just have in you? Because sometimes relating it to training, powerlifting, people getting stronger, sometimes there is. You talk about comfort zones when things get difficult, when there's challenges, obstacles. Sometimes people get to that point and then be like, no, 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 let's just go back. Let's just go back here. There's no point going from there. Where do you think that mindset came from for you? And how do you apply that to your coaching? I know I spoke a little bit there, but does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you know, it's how we frame difficulties and how we frame suffering is the big thing. So you got two options, right? And it's, let's use it an extreme example. Let's say you had terminal cancer, right? And you're going to die in 6 months. You can either turn in on yourself and become a total wound in the last 6 months of your life or a living hell. Or you can aim up. You're like, you know what? I know I have 6 months. I can spend this next 6 months with my family and doing the things that I haven't done in my life up to this point, and I can enjoy it. And then there's a timeline at the end of this, and then I can, go home and be with Jesus, right? But you have that choice in everything that you do, and they say in the Bible, right? Like when we face trials of any kind, count it all joy, because in that suffering, that produces perseverance. That perseverance produces faith, and it's you can view these difficult circumstances as character building moments. And if you choose not to, and you just choose to just be this, oh, woe is me, my life is so hard, etc., your character is not going to build. And then the second thing that comes as a consequence of that is you're actually just actively choosing to be miserable, right? You're just choosing to be miserable. And so in my coaching, right, I'll have people that are going through a hard time, and then I'll tell them, I'm like, okay, well, what is this circumstance trying to pull out of you, right? Like what are the things that we can take from this? And they're like, well, I'm gonna have to figure out how to work around this difficult circumstance. And I'm like, okay, and what kind of character is that building? They're like, oh, well, it's going to build perseverance, it's going to build patience, it's going to build X or Y or Z. And I'm like, okay, are those things that you're lacking? They're like, oh yeah, absolutely. And I was like, so this is good, right? This is a good circumstance that we find ourselves in. And the circumstance, objectively speaking, kind of sucks, but there is good that can come from this.
Yeah.
And so we have to focus on that good that can come from this, as opposed to just consuming ourselves with the misery that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. And do you think that is, we talk about developing skills, and do you think that is, I mean, I understand, what you're saying, given the circumstances aren't ideal, but do you think that is a skill that, once you've kind of overcome one obstacle or one challenge, that's a skill that becomes stronger? And then when you were saying there about, right, what am I teaching? Perseverance, solving, finding solutions to problems. Do you think that's a skill that people get better at, and is a natural, maybe learning curve or progression for people to be like, look, because I always think if you are learning, whether you do well or not so well, you can take something from it. Do you think it's a skill that people can learn, and that just comes from experience rather than getting it nailed right there and then?
Absolutely. And what I would say is, like, I, in retrospect, I'm grateful that I've dealt with a lot of difficult circumstances in my
Yeah.
life. And each subsequent time that, these hard seasons come, it's easier and easier to deal with, right? Like people are like, "Oh, how did you bounce back from, what happened in December?" And I'm like, because I've gone through other hard things before, right? It's a muscle that I have built. And I think, what I'm always very, very um, conscious of explaining, to my clients who go through difficult circumstances, I'm like, this is never going to be this hard again, because you've built the skills this time. But you have to choose to build those skills. They're not just going to naturally arrive, right? It's in a framing of the circumstance, and it's a dealing with the circumstance in a certain way that's going to allow these things to build. And then the next time a hard season comes, you're going to be more prepared for it because you've built that skill.
Yeah.
And so it's exactly like you said, right? That perseverance, and ultimately, there's not a single person who's gotten to an extreme level of strength or accomplished something great in life who has not dealt with setbacks, injuries, difficulties. Right? It's not like this linear, beautiful increase to the best in the world. It's like there's difficult, tough stuff that every single person has gone through, and that's almost a precondition of success. Like I don't know many, if any, people who have accomplished something great who have had that in absence. So, I would say it's like it's going to happen either way, and you can either develop skills from those circumstances, or you can just be a whiny baby and not learn anything, and only one of those is going to carry forward into the rest of your lifting career and allow you to be better.
Yeah, definitely. And do you find this might be a little bit of a tangent, but when clients approach a coach, they either look and see, well, he can lift a lot, he can do X, or he or she can do X, Y, or Z. There's an attraction there of wanting that person as a coach. Do you find that either, new clients that you've worked with, or current clients, athletes that you're working with, through, the adversity or challenges that you've overcome, if you like, do you find that clients and athletes are maybe sharing obstacles and challenges a little bit more with you, and that's becoming maybe more of a topic of conversation, or are you kind of like more aware of those things? I know this is a little bit of a tangent and maybe yeah going into a coaching side of things, but I find it interesting, that because you've had so many um, overcome so many challenges, a little bit like what we're doing here, chatting about them and seeing how you progress from them. It'd be interesting to see how you found that in terms of the clients and athletes that you're working with, the training side of things, but also, how much does that mindset actually come into play in your coaching?
A ton, right? And it's like I have a client of mine who had like he had some like weird health stuff, and then he ended up in hospital, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and I just kept reminding him. I was like, no, this is a good thing, man. Like, we're gonna get through this. There's another side of this. We have a plan in place where this is not going to happen again. This is awesome, because once this is done, all of the issues that we've dealt with up to this point that eventually got us to this point, there was some prior health issues that eventually required his hospitalization. And I was like, we now know what those are, and we now know that those are not going to be a thing anymore because they've taken care of that root cause. So this is great. Like, this is ultimately a great thing. And so, what I always, it does come up often. And I will say that I think the more I talk about, kind of the optimism in difficult circumstances, those sorts of things, like, certain people gravitate towards that. And then those people become clients. So it kind of naturally arrives as a topic of conversation, because someone who's never dealt with anything difficult is not going to come to me and be like, oh, this is the guy that can help me with my difficult stuff, because it's not something I've ever experienced. It doesn't even register in their mind. They're like, oh, okay, whatever. And they go and hire somebody else.
Yeah, yeah. Because with the conversation of that of when it's coming up there and people seeing that in your initial kind of onboarding and speaking about that, does that come up kind of like straight away, or is that something that you ask in terms of like their mindset? Has anything changed from that in terms of how you kind of onboard a client and speak about that, or is it just kind of that relationship building that it comes up from the conversations because they've already seen what you've overcome and then gone from there?
Yeah. So, like, one of the questions I ask when I hop on the phone with them is, um, like, when you've had difficult circumstances in training, how have you dealt with it? And they'll be like, oh, well, I did X, Y, and Z. It's like, okay, well, what were your initial emotional responses? Oh, well, I felt X, Y, and Z. And it's like, okay, was that a helpful or a harmful emotional response? And they're like, well, it was harmful. It's like, okay, so for us, we need to understand, and you have to understand that it's a precondition of training that we're going to have seasons where it kind of sucks. Do you understand that responding in that way actively makes things harder? So, like, yes. So can we make the agreement that we're going to choose to respond in this way when hard things come up? Yes. Right. So it's essentially just asking about past difficulty. How did you respond to it? What were the emotions you felt? Okay, well, these were either good or bad, or helpful or unhelpful. Do you want to frame them as good or bad? And then just getting them to understand, it's like, well, we can choose to respond a different way. And this is how we would choose to respond differently. This is how we would choose to frame it. And they're like, oh, okay. And then when it comes up, and if you get them to make that agreement when it comes up, you're like, hey, well, we actually agreed like 5 months ago that if these circumstances arose, this is how we were going to respond. I'm like, oh, okay. I got it. I'm like, yeah, you can make that choice right now. They're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Do you find as though going back to the skill point of view, because I think the thing as a coach, as a trainer, you have a tendency to say the same things more than once. So like what you said there, 5 months ago we said this. What have you thought about this? Do you find yourself kind of having to highlight it a little bit more? Because yes, we've got all the training side of things. There's challenges with training, fitting things around work, life, all that sort of stuff. Do you find for the mindset side of thing, it is a case of, you there, reminding them and being like, look, this is what, like what you said there, what we've spoken about and reply. And then is there a point where all of a sudden it's like, right, this is what actually happens, as opposed to always having to remind them all the time.
Yeah, there's always going to be that emotional development as a, with an athlete. And I think our job as a coach is to like shorten the latency period for that. Right. So we equip them with the tools beforehand. And then we just in that moment remind them to use tools. Right. And so it's like, hey, you're camping right now. You have to build a fire. What would you do? Oh, well, I have to gather the firewood. Okay, what else do you do? I have to put kindling together. Okay, what else do you do? I need to find my lighter. Okay, what else do you do? I have to light the kindling on fire, right? And it's like you take them through that process. It's like, well, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and you do this. We know what to do, right? Yes. Okay, so go do it. So it's a lot of the times it's just when things are good, build those systems, frame them in a positive enough way that they understand that it's helpful. Because I think also what happens with a lot of people is a lot of the emotional turmoil in training stems back to like this inherent belief that like they're not going to be able to figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. So they're freaking out because they're like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. It's like, no, 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 no. That's not, you don't actually have to figure that out. It's my job to figure that out. Like, I'm the one that figures out to fix the program. You just have to do the work. And then
Yeah.
you just have to deal with the emotions that arise from having a bad circumstance or having a bad training session. They're like, oh, okay. Right. So you offload the mental side to them and then you get them to, with whatever's left over, be like, okay, well, this is how you deal with it.
Yeah. And is that because, sometimes interesting what you said there about, you're the person there that is, okay, this is what we're going to do, providing solutions as a coach, as a trainer. I think you are there, that's what the clients, athletes are paying you for, to provide solutions, develop a system, follow the plan, and get what they want to achieve at the end of it. When it is a difficult circumstance and you're giving solutions, is that why do you think people, put up barriers and be like, well, no, I can't do this, I can't do that, because it's more of a emotional response, whereas, as a coach, you're looking at it from kind of like a logical point of view. It's like, right, well, we can't do this. This is the problem. We're gonna try and do this. And how much does it take to kind of break that down to get them to actually follow the plan or the solutions that you've provided within that difficult circumstance, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think, with those, you're exactly right. Right. It's like an emotion logic mismatch. And oftentimes like the brain likes to maintain homeostasis, right? It likes to stay the exact same and it doesn't want to change patterns, because if it's always responded in X way, it's going to want to continue to respond in X way. And then what you do is you write out a list of, benefits of responding in X way, and you write out a list of benefits of responding in Y way. It's like, okay, well, we've always responded this way, which is culminated in us not enjoying training. It's culminated in us having intermittent periods where we quit. It's culminated in us, it negatively affecting other parts of our life. And then it's culminated in us having this all or nothing thinking where it's like, oh, well, if I'm not going to PB everything in this meet, I'm just not going to do it. And it's like, okay, so do you think those sorts of responses are going to get you to your end goal? Well, no. It's like, okay, but if we respond this way, right, and in difficult circumstances, we can push through training, understands a bad session's a bad session. That's all it is. Understanding that even if we have a bad meet prep, we can have a good meet. Understanding that even if we have a bad meet, that's still data and there's still more meets in the future. It's like only one of those is going to allow us to get to our ultimate goal. And then they're like, yeah, that's a good point. Okay. It's like, okay, so we know that the way that we're currently responding has no evidence that it works. Like, yes. It's like, okay, so we have to respond in the other way. That's our only other choice.
Yeah.
And they're like, all right, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And is that something that, because I know we've spoken there about um well, all the way through this chat so far about, right, you can either just be in your miserable state or look as if we were going to progress from there. Is that something that you did yourself? Was the challenges or points where yourself were like, yeah, this is too tough, too challenging, or trying to see the next step from there? Is that something that you've done yourself, tried yourself? These strategies to keep moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, a lot of the times it came, thankfully, before my powerlifting career, right?
Mm.
Like I was 6 weeks out of my junior season for rugby, and I got away on a break. And then their fullback ankle tapped me, and I was like, "Oh, I thought I was going to score this 60-meter try!" Right? I was so excited. And then our 8 man was running in support, and then when he went to ruck over, he tripped, and I was turtling the ball, right? So I'm like trying to slowly release it because I didn't want to get poached, and I'm turtling the ball, and he trips when he tries to ruck over me because he's trying to just murder this fullback and clear him out, and his knee goes into my shoulder blade and breaks my shoulder blade, dislocates my shoulder, tears my lat. And then I get up, my shoulder's dislocated. I like put it back in the socket. I go off. The trainer tapes my arm to my side, and then I played the rest of the game. And that was 6 weeks before the start of my college season, right? Because I was playing summer rugby.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, well, this sucks. And I was like, I can be a whiny baby about this because I'm going to be banged up for my fall season, or I can be like, and for probably the first 2-3 weeks, I was a wound, right? I was like, oh, this isn't fair. I can't believe this happened. Da, 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 da. And then, the more I thought about it, I was like, okay, well, there's no way that I don't play this fall season, and I might have to get banged up. I might have to tape my shoulder every game. I might have to take a bunch of ibuprofen, but I'm going to play this fall season. And ultimately I have to be grateful that I can play this fall season, and that, the labrum tear wasn't bad enough that I can't play at all and I have to get surgery.
Yeah.
So, I'd had circumstances like that in the past where I initially did kind of have a crappy response. I was like, okay, well, this absolutely isn't working. So I absolutely have to respond in another way. And then, like even before I ruptured both my patellar tendons, like I was always, because I'd played contact sports for long, and much the same, right? It's like, you play 10 seasons, 12 seasons of contact sports, like you're a mess, right? Like, it's like, all kinds of stuff is banged up. And so I kept getting these like little aches and pains and small injuries when I played sports. When I was powerlifting. And so like I popped my vastus lateralis and my TFL on my left leg, and then I did my right leg, and then I tore my pec for like the 25th time, and so it's like I was already like pretty used to getting banged up and being banged up. And so each time, I would allow myself like the rest of the day to just be a baby about it, right? I was like, oh, this is hard. This sucks, right? But then I just set an end date for the misery. I was like, you know what? Like before the last meet that I competed in or completed in December of 2023, 3 weeks out, exploded my hamstring, right? And on my last deadlift, I had been pulling on a Texas Olive prep, and then I pulled on a Kabuki, and the whip of the Kabuki caught me at the knee. Boom, right hamstring explodes. And we're driving home, and I'm like, maybe I'll do bench only in this meet. And then I'm like, I'm not going to be a pussy about it. I'm going to be a pussy about it for the rest of the day. But then beyond that point, I'm not going to be a pussy about it. And so I went home, and like I ate a bunch of shitty food, and I just like watched TV, and I was like, oh, this sucks. And then the next morning I got up, I was like, I'm going to go rehab. And so the next day I went in and I deadlifted what I could, which was like 70 kilos. And then I don't think I pulled over like 225 in prep. And then 6 days post tear, I squatted my last heavy one of prep, and I think I squatted 305. And like, dude, the whole back of my leg was still black and blue. Like I was still all beat up, but I just made the disagreement with myself. I was like, I'm not quitting. I'm not giving up. I've already been a whiny baby about this. I'm done being a whiny baby. I'm just going to figure it out. And then I ended up, in the meet, I think I ended up squatting 320. And then I think I ended up pulling, 327.5. Right. And the heaviest I had pulled afterwards, after the hamstring tear, was like, 225. And so I was like, all right, well, and then I ended up having a great meet, and I went 9 for 9. So I was like, you set an end date for the being a baby. And then from that point forward, just decide to fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that thing of, like what we said before, learning from those experiences. And, I think it's as much as, we've said there or said earlier about, right, you need to be able to, move on, you need to be able to, try and get some progress from there. But equally, it's you need to have that point where you do have that, oh, this is rubbish, this is anything like that. But going back to what you were speaking about in terms of, that emotional side of thing and the logical side of things, he can dictate how long that emotional reaction is going to be, and setting a hard deadline of right for the rest of the day. I mean, it'd be a bit of a pain in the ass if it was at the end of the day that it happened and it's like, I've only got till bedtime. God damn. But do you know what I mean? It's like that, that makes sense. Moving on, and that does move on quite nicely to the next side of things, because you've said there about time frames for um, when you're going to move on from there, and like you said, the next day going in and doing rehab. In terms of these injuries, in terms of being able to get back to playing, the contact sport or whatever else is from there, kind of not trying to go into, what is the amount of time that it needs to take, but what's kind of the deadlines to be able to set goals, to be able to have that patience, to be like, look, this is where we're at now, and we need to get to this point. What's kind of your take on time frames and having that patience to be like, look, this is the amount of time that you're going to have to spend doing this, and how much effort you put in at that time dictates how much you can progress to the next stage, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I mean, it always comes back to like the general prognosis for the injury. So if it's non-surgical, right, surgical or non-surgical, surgical, obviously there's a hard timeline for the recovery of the tissues associated with the surgery. And so, let's take the example of my bicep tendon, right? I did my bicep tendon, had the surgery. They did a, cortical button attachment, which is a pretty high strength reattachment. And there's a couple of, timelines that have to be satisfied in order for us to push forward and load it. The first timeline is the bone callus has to form because they drill a hole through your radius and attach the bicep on the other side. So the first timeline is that has to be taken care of. So we have to wait at least 6 weeks for the bone callus to form before we do any kind of, very light load through the range of motion. And then the tendon to bone interface takes about 12 weeks. So for us to actually kind of push hard and be able to rehab and do lots of reps with still a moderate weight, that'll take about 12 weeks. And then it's about 6 months to have the bicep come back to full strength size normality. But with a non-surgical, let's say a muscle tear, unless it's like if it's non-surgical, muscle tears are all kind of the same thing, which is that there is local inflammation, there is a downregulation in motor unit recruitment, so those muscles aren't going to turn on as well, and there's essentially DOMS, right? So the muscle doesn't turn on. You have a ton of inflammation, and there's DOMS, and then there's a bunch of waste products in the muscle, right? But from the torn tissue. The rehab for that's actually, you can get pretty aggressive with it, right? Like from my hamstring tear to competing was 3 weeks, and I tore my hamstring on 320, and then I pulled 327.5 in the knee. So it's just about being aggressive with the rehab and understanding that, like, if it's a muscle tear, unless it's super friggin' bad, it really doesn't take that long to come back. And if it's something like a herniation, that's got a timeline, and that takes a little bit longer. If it's surgical, it'll be it's going to be based on the recovery of the tissues associated in the surgery. But the timelines are just dependent on, like if you pop your pec, like I've had meets where I pop my pec 2 weeks out and I benched PR in the meet. Like, it's not, if you're just aggressive about it and you modify your technique around it, it typically comes back pretty quick. And then with surgical stuff, like my knees, they told me 2 years. And at first I was like, fuck you. And then now I'm kind of around the 2 year mark, and I'm realizing they were 100% right, because, that patellar tendon crosses the knee joint, which means that it alters knee kinematics. And then the tendons really stiffen up. And in order for those tendons to become more pliable and not feel as bad, that takes about 2 years for your body to calm down, right? So every orthopedic surgery or every injury's got a timeline. With the soft tissue stuff, it's not actually that long. And it just, the aggression or the aggressiveness of the rehab and the frequency of the rehab is going to dictate how long it takes.
Yeah. And with that, because you've said, you've given some timelines there, and kind of a little bit of a two-part of this. Do you think because, people sometimes rush that? I know you've said about being, aggressive in the rehab and getting on there. Is there a point where you can rush things too much because it's kind of impatient and just like want to go from there? Or by being that more aggressive, it's going to be more beneficial. And then the second part, if you like, is do you think with the from the mindset side of things, actually for something that could be, I think you said there, 3 weeks or 2 weeks, and then going into a competition, that actually that negative mindset of, oh no, this is the worst thing in the world, actually then drags out that timeline a little bit more for something that could have been fixed a lot sooner.
Yeah. So to answer the second one first, you never want to be scared of getting back on the horse,
Yeah.
right? And you put constraints in place so that getting back on the horse is less scary, right? Maybe at first you ride a donkey and then you move to a horse, but you get back on some kind of animal. Um, and I think the other side of it is so you got to put yourself in a position with sufficient constraints that you can get back on the animal without putting yourself in risk of like additional injury.
Yeah.
But I think with the root of a lot of these injuries, there's a reason why they happen, right? There's a cause, and a lot of the times it's a breakdown in technique or crappy technique to begin with. And so if we just try to get aggressive in our rehab and go back right back to the same technique that typically caused it in the first place, then it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
But if we alter, the way that the technique is and we change, the load ordering and things like that, typically it's not going to be as much of an issue. Like, perfect example, if I benched with my knuckles straight like this, right? Knuckles pointed to the sky on a press. I am missing like all of my pec minor on my right side, my subclavius, and I have a huge gap and a hole in my right pec. And if I bench with a straight wrist, when I get into shoulder extension, because that pec minor is not there, this pec will, at sufficient weight, will pop, right? And so what I did was I was like, all right, I know that this hurts me, but if I put the bar high in my hand, then it loads more into my triceps, and then it's less shoulder extension demand, and it's less required of my pec. So that's how I now have to bench. And so understanding that like there's a change in technique that has to occur to make sure that you're not overloading into the same tissue that got hurt. And then if you're aggressive with rehab, you should be okay. But there's also the timelines are going to be dictated by if they're competing or not.
Yeah.
So if it's in an off season and something happens and we don't have a meet for 6 months, then what you would do is you're trying to re-ingrain that new pattern or new technique. So you start with tons of tempo and then you go to long pause and then you go to regular, and that might take 3 months. And we're not taking 3 months because that's how long it takes to recover. We're taking 3 months because that's probably how long it's going to take to have good technique in the new technique. And then, but if there's a hard line of like there's a meet 4 weeks out, you give them something called a balance of probabilities. So they're like, it's like, hey, this is a pretty bad one. You can do this meet. There's probably a 50-50 chance that you hurt yourself again in the meet. If you're okay with that, you can do the meet. If you're not okay with that, then I wouldn't do the meet.
Yeah.
So you just tell them, you're like, hey, like it's not going to be 100% by that 2, 3, 4 week mark. It's not. It's a pretty bad tear. It's not. But if you want to do it, you can do it. There's a chance that it goes well, but there's also a chance that it really doesn't go well. And it's up to you. I'm not making that decision for you.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, and it's been kind of a common theme through this is having that, like what I kind of wanted to touch on at the start as well, is that honesty of accepting what the situation is and being like, look, what is it? What is it you're going to do from there? Are you going to do the meet? 3 months focusing on this, accepting that you need to adjust the technique because there is going to be a change that's going to happen, rather than being like, well, that's not how I used to do it before. Because that's the other thing. I think there's always an element of you're going to compare to, well, I wasn't doing this before. Why do I have to do this now? And it's like, well, that's kind of the situation that you're in. Like you either do this and you can move forward, or you don't do it and you're still just stuck treading water. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And it's like no, it's just like here's the problem. We know the cause. Fix the cause.
Yeah, yeah,
That's it. That's the
absolutely.
only way to do it.
um, Quite a lot of topics, tangents thrown in there, but I thought there was some really, really good content in there, Stu. But the last question that I like to ask for everyone listening, whether it's the coaches out there or the lifters out there, what would be your take home points or words of wisdom from what we've spoken about today?
Uh, Hard times are always going to come, and you have an opportunity in those circumstances to either build character or to be miserable in a wound to everyone around you. Um, Only one of those at the end of your life is going to make you proud of what you've done. So, choice is yours.
Yeah. What an absolute words of wisdom to finish on there. I was like, I didn't know what to say to that then. Yeah, I think that's a good a good way to end the episode. And I think yeah, from everything that we've spoken about there, and I always try and have conversations around conversations that I've had with clients and other coaches. And I think in whatever we do, there's always a choice. And actually, sometimes the best choice isn't always the easiest choice. Sometimes, it has to be a difficult choice to make to move forward a little bit, or else if not, you're always going to come up barriers and walls, and then just stay where you're at, which yeah isn't an ideal place to be. If anyone has any questions about what we've spoken about today, want to reach out to you or see the content that you share, where could people find you, Stu?
Yeah. So it's just Stu underscore Kodiak Barbell on Instagram. Don't have a TikTok. I upload on my YouTube like once a month. Just send me a message on Instagram. We'll figure it out together.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. Was really looking forward to chatting with you today. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will catch you all at the next episode.